You know, an Ole Miss defender might just be the key to a perfect season. I'm not joking.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Rebel fans. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's episode, we're talking about Pete Golding's defense, finally reaching that elite level that could see the Rebels winning every game this season. You know, a perfect season has only happened once for Ole Miss under the legendary coach Johnny Vaught, but with defenders like Walter Nolen and Princely Umanmielen and Chris Ball, this team is built to be competitive in every single game. Plus, Suntarine Perkins as a versatile joker card adds that extra athleticism and energy Pete Golding needs to make this defense truly elite. So buckle up, Rebel fans. This could be a season for the history books. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or even Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy, or Zach Blackerby at Locked On Auburn. They provide other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and even Ole Miss. So check it out. You know how I feel about perspectives. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports just stop sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So today we're going to empty out the clip in the hot take machine, essentially, because with Ole Miss being by several people as a playoff lock in the preseason, again, none of these predictions mean necessarily anything, but you don't get there for no reason. And basically everybody that's anybody is talking about Ole Miss as a playoff lock going into it. And you see stuff comes out with Ole Miss actually hosting a playoff game. Maybe not winning all the games, but enough to where you're hosting a playoff game and finishing in that 5 to 8 slot. I mean, it's pretty heady territory if you think about it. And this year feels a little bit different just because of that, but also for other reasons. Like Pete Golding finally has a defense where you put it on the field and you don't have to worry about Lane Kiffin's elite offense having to outscore the opponent. Last season, even when Ole Miss went 11-2, they were forced to outscore LSU at home. And it got to the point where LSU's offense was doing whatever they wanted in the second and third quarter. But Ole Miss was able to win that game. Against Georgia, they were not able to do that. We all talked about what was going on and how much Ole Miss had to struggle to move the ball down the field to score their opening touchdown. Was like, man, this could be a long day. And that game forced Pete Golding's like, hey, we are going to rebuild this defense with SEC level players. We're going to hit the transfer portal with SEC level players. And they did. They went out and got Princely Umanmielen, who is the national leader, I think, in pass rushing, going against traditional passes. And Walter Nolen, a former number one player in the country. Chris Pupal, just an excellent linebacker at Arkansas that gave Ole Miss fits in that game. And Ole Miss picked up Key Lawrence and Lewis Moore and Yam Banks and Trey Amos and Isaiah Hamilton. And the defense just completely got remade to the point where, hey, you've got good players at every position to where you can stack up with who you're playing against. But that is probably good enough for an 11-1 or 10-2 type season. That isn't good enough for a perfect season. And the perfect season, the secret sauce of the perfect season is in Suntarine Perkins. He is the joker card on this Pete Golding defense that they're going to move around. Honestly, he is going to do in this Ole Miss defense what LSU should have done with Harold Perkins a year ago instead of shoehorning him in as a linebacker. Pete Golding is working on Suntarine Perkins now that he is comfortable to play a little linebacker, to play a little defensive end, to play a little husky, whatever that position is called, that hybrid end, to do some 4-3 and some 3-3 type stuff. And the defense can look different than it has in previous years because of the concepts of like Zach Arnett and Coach Spanos and those people on the defensive side of the ball bringing in their stuff to what Pete Golding is familiar with. Suntarine Perkins lining up is that rush in to get after the quarterback, lining up at a different spot across the field and doing a little pass coverage, using his athleticism to blitz from the second level. This is the position to where Ole Miss is going to make its bones. We always talk about how college quarterbacks they're not great. They're not good. They make mistakes. And the purpose is to get to the quarterback as quickly as possible and make them throw it into a tight window to where every college quarterback is going to make a mistake. Eventually, he's going to have one picked off and you might take one to the house. So Ole Miss did this. You have your joker card in Suntarine Perkins. You have your pass rusher in Princely and Umanmielen. You have a great defensive lineman in Walter Nolen, who we're going to talk about in the third segment about Walter Nolen. You know, Jared Ivey, Chris Hardy. There is a lot of people that can affect the quarterback in that first level. Now you bring in a Suntarine Perkins to be able to affect it from the second level, and you get ball hawks to play behind them at corner and Trey Amos and Isaiah Hamilton or Brandon Turnage. So many defensive backs on this defense that are ball hawks. They have ball skills. So whenever the quarterback messes up, those people are there to pounce. And the best part about this whole thing and what we've talked about is all of this is designed to give the ball back to that offense. So these 51 to 45 tight games that Ole Miss has played, it might be 51 to 17 now, to where it's not necessarily even a boat race. It's just over midway through the third quarter. A game against Georgia that does the boat racing to you, all of a sudden that talent gap is closed. They're not going to be able to move the ball and score the ball so easily. Carson Beck did not get his uniform dirty last year in Athens. He will get his uniform dirty this year. I am willing to guarantee that. And I'm surely can say this offense is going to be ready to go as well, because the cauldron and everything that went into that Ole Miss Georgia game last year, that's not going to be available to the Georgia fans and the Georgia players in Oxford, Mississippi, in a game that is already a hard sellout. Suntarine Perkins being that joker card to go against a very great defense to begin with, that is going to be the secret sauce. That is going to be worth 2 or 3 turnovers over the course of the year if he gets turned loose. When he plays on the same field, on the same time with Princely and Umanmielen. How do you do when you blitz 5, you rush 5 on a play, and one of them is Princely and Umanmielen, the other is Suntarine Perkins, and you have those big linemen in the middle? What do? How do you handle that? Because, here you go. This is a little hint. You can't. Unless you are Georgia, you do not have the people available to handle that situation to where somebody is going to get home. The other defensive lineman, the slow defensive lineman, he's the guy that Ole Miss puts in on 4th and 1 and runs the ball. The athleticism on this front is unmatched in the annals of Ole Miss history. Unmatched. And all of this together, Ole Miss is going to be a favorite probably by kickoff in 11 of their 12 games. I think Georgia will end up being the favorite in that one game, but Georgia's only going to be a 5-6 point favorite in that game. It's not outside the realm of possibility that Ole Miss can win that game. And that margin, that small margin, is going to be on the defensive side of the ball for Ole Miss and specifically Suntarine Perkins. You want a perfect season, Ole Miss fans? It starts with number 4 on defense. I told you we were getting hot takey today, and a perfect season, that is very hot takey, but it is possible. Ole Miss is probably going to be favored before the kickoff of every game except Georgia, and they're only going to be like a 4 or 5 point underdog against the Georgia Bulldogs. Pretty fun stuff. Coming up next, we're diving back into the trenches. Yes, back-to-back days talking about the offensive line. So get ready for more insights you can't afford to miss. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But when the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games. The sports just aren't sportsing the way I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up any bets I want anytime I am in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is giving up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Maybe I can bet on Ole Miss's over-under on wins, which currently sits at 9.5 this season. Maybe if you're interested, you can bet on Ole Miss being minus 122 to make the college football playoff, or perhaps Jaxson Dart at plus 1,500 to win the Heisman Trophy. Maybe that is your flavor. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion of the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, and the new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the offensive line was as healthy as they've probably been during fall camp on Thursday's practice. Nate Kalepo was back as a full participant in fall practice, and everybody's been waiting on him to get back and be good to go. And it got me thinking. We were talking about what needed to happen on the defensive side of the ball for a perfect season. So this episode is kind of the perfect storm episode. What has to happen? Because I don't know if it's enough just for the defense doing what I said earlier in the first segment. I think the offense is going to have to help in a different way. A year ago, the offensive line was, let's call them maligned. And the fan base was against them. They just were. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Ole Miss runs a ton of RPOs, and Jaxson Dart is just a really tough dude, and he holds on the ball way longer than he should. But sometimes the defenses did what I called engage 8, which is the old Madden play, basically, to where they just overpopulated the middle of the field. And when Ole Miss did a split protection, they were able to come through and kind of force immediate pressure on Jaxson Dart, or if it was a running play. So that did get me concerned about the offensive line. And the coaching staff was concerned about the offensive line as well, because they went and got Kalepo. They went and got Julius Buelow. They went and got Gerquon Scott and Diego Pounds to go with like Jaden Williams and Micah Pettis and Jeremy James and Caleb Warren and Eli Acker and all of those guys. I mean, younger guys like Preston Cushman who are getting reps out on the outside. There was a lot of questions about this offensive line going into the season. I mean, that's not speaking out of turn to say that. So you bring in these transfers and you hope they mesh. And Ole Miss during spring, and let's say they did whatever they could not to have a depth chart, to make it to where people would not leave during the transfer portal window. College coaches hate the spring transfer portal window. The spring transfer portal window honestly should probably go away, because if your coach leaves, you still get a window opening up at that point anyway. There's no reason for that transfer portal window. And then as soon as the season ends, you can go ahead and do all the portaling that you need to do. But I digress. Because of that, we don't know the combinations of the offensive line. We don't know what the starting unit is going to look like. Nobody does. Lane Kiffin doesn't know. Charlie Weiss doesn't know. John Garrison does not know, because that was intentionally done during the spring so they wouldn't know. And so now you're starting at essentially a square one, and there's a heck of a lot of battles that are happening on the offensive line. If there's an open practice that you can go to at some point, it's probably worth going and checking out the offensive line competitions and who's lining up where, and getting an idea of where the depth chart sits on that day. Because right now there's a depth chart. There is. They may not be telling people, but there's a depth chart because it's just fluid. It goes up and down whenever you do it, because they have to get to the point where the cream has risen to the top. So you look at these transfers that Ole Miss brought in. Diego Pounds, left tackle, higher grade than both tackles that Ole Miss had a year ago. This is going to be a different style offense than Ole Miss had a year ago. Micah Pettis is a really good player. He is a absolute dog, and I think he's going to lock down the right tackle position. But Diego Pounds and Jaden Williams, who was the left tackle starter in 2022, they're going to have to battle it out over the course of the next 3 weeks and maybe into the season. In a perfect season, neither one of them probably takes control in the next 2 weeks. There's a competition, and both of them kind of pushes each other. So in a perfect season, to get the most out of your team against LSU, against Georgia, against Oklahoma, you probably need a little bit of work in this opening, especially with the non-conference games that Ole Miss has. Nate Kalepo, he needs to ramp up as well. Coming into practice, he's starting 5 practices late. He is somebody that needs to be there as well. Julius Buelow, Jeremy James, who has put on like 20 pounds over the course of the offseason. That's going to be interesting as well. And we have talked about Gerquon Scott and Caleb Warren and the center position for Ole Miss. My point is, for Ole Miss to end up 12-0 with a game in Atlanta, because 12-0 would put them in Atlanta, the offensive line is going to have to contribute probably as much as the defensive line. Everybody's counting on the Ole Miss defensive line to be special this season, and I'm one of them. I mean, that's what I think. But it is a situation to where I don't think that Ole Miss can necessarily just get away with good offensive line play, especially with an explosive running back. You don't necessarily have the workhorse. I know about Rashad Amos, but if you're going to split up carries and it's going to look like 2020 and 2021, you're also going to have Henry Parrish at 190 pounds and Ulysses Bentley at 205 to go with, the other option is 235 pounds with Rashad Amos. This offensive line is going to have to come together against Furman. Furman's probably going to do some games. They're going to do some twists. There's going to be movement in that game that you have not seen in fall camp. Middle Tennessee is going to do the same. You're not going to face a team that's going to feel like they can line up and get you until Ole Miss plays Kentucky. Kentucky's defensive line is sneaky good. They're going to be the first real test. And then you have South Carolina. They're going to be similar to Kentucky, and then LSU. There's always dudes on LSU's team. This offensive line play, for Ole Miss to do what everybody wants Ole Miss to do, the offensive line play has to be great. Can't be good, has to be great. Good will get them into the playoffs. Good offensive line play will get them in the playoffs. A special season, you're going to need great next level offensive line play. Coming up next on Locked On Ole Miss, when Pete Golding compares a defensive lineman to Quinnen Williams, you know it's serious. Find out who he's talking about and why it could be a game changer for the Rebels defense. Stay tuned. Game Time is your place to get your Ole Miss tickets with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time actually takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. There's not a bad seat in Vaught Hemingway Stadium, but this place gives you an opportunity on the app to see exactly what it's going to look like from that seat. So you can check it out before you buy the ticket. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all the customer service stuff that you would be interested in, they have. So take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I may be able to help you out with tickets too. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So Pete Golding, everybody knows, spoke yesterday. We talked about that in the first segment. But another thing that he mentioned was talking about how Walter Nolen had get off and twitchiness like Quinnen Williams, and that is next level praise. Quinnen Williams was like the number 3 pick in the NFL draft. He's the best defensive lineman that the SEC has seen in the last 10 years. He is, for lack of a better word, just special and a game wrecker for whoever he's going against. He's a guaranteed double team. We always talk about double teams on the defensive line and why it's important. You have a situation to where he is a guaranteed double team going into this season. You need that second double team. Who is going to be the second double team beside him? Is it going to be J.J. Pegues? Is it going to be Princely Umanmielen, who, as I told you earlier, the number 1 player in pass rush get home percentage against standard passing plays last season? Is it going to be Jared Ivey? Is it going to be Chris Hardy? Is it going to be a situation to where Suntarine Perkins and Umanmielen is on the field at the same time pressuring that offense? There is a situation to where Pete Golding has an abundance of toys, and this defensive line has a chance to be next level for Ole Miss. It has a chance to be what we haven't seen with that potential best pass rusher in college football, potentially the best defensive lineman in college football, to go with J.J. Pegues and Jared Ivey, who Jared Ivey was just the Peach Bowl defensive MVP, and J.J. Pegues, he's all everything and doing all that. And here's the other thing. William Eccles, the young true freshman from Houston, Mississippi, who showed up at Ole Miss at 315 pounds, ready to go. That's called a straight out of the box, ready. That's what that is. Cam Franklin came at Ole Miss, 6'5", 275 pounds, out of the box ready. And in 97% of Ole Miss's defenses, those players would be playing year 1. Now Cam Franklin and William Eccles, they're not just backups, but in some cases they might be third team. William Eccles is good. He is good. But Jamarius Brown is also good. He's a defensive lineman out of Moss Point. I don't talk about him much, but he's good. He was a redshirt last year. But you have Akello Stone, who played a lot last season. I expect him to play a good bit this season. You have Xavion Harris, who was the field goal blocking machine, just another monster of a human being playing defensive line. Where does William Eccles fit? Now, probably in that next tier. Cam Franklin probably is playing in a backup type thing, but he might be down in the third tier because Chris Hardy could be playing that defensive end position behind Jared Ivey. We're not 100% sure about that. We have to wait and see until Ole Miss goes out on the field for confirmation on that. Ole Miss defensively, and especially on the defensive line, whenever they say they're 9 deep, normally everybody's going to hear that and they're just going to roll their eyes because every coach every single year talks about how deep they are on the defensive line, and then they don't play near that many players. I think they're probably going to get pretty close to playing that many players this year. Now, it might not be really good for playing time for William Eccles and Cam Franklin and Jeffrey Rush and Cam Beavers and that defensive line class that was so good for Pete Golding and the Ole Miss Rebels defense. They might have to wait a year this year, get some garbage time playing against Furman, all of that, but they still have some work they have to do. But whenever you look at Walter Nolen getting compared to one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL, and probably, like I said, the best defensive lineman to come out of the SEC in the last 10 years, that's heady stuff, especially when the guy coached the guy. Pete Golding, just a blessing, just an absolute blessing to be such a football guy. It's so great to hear from him talking. He is that gruff defensive coordinator that is the stereotype of all defensive coordinators. And he's got toys this year. He's got real Alabama-esque toys this year. There may not be a better defensive end in Princely Umanmielen. I mean, James Pierce at Tennessee, he's obviously very high level. I don't know if he's as good as Princely Umanmielen. He might be, but it could be opinion-based. Walter Nolen, absolute monster. Like I said, if J.J. Pegues can be that guy next to Walter Nolen to force single coverage from time to time against Princely Umanmielen, against Jared Ivey or Chris Hardy or even Suntarine Perkins, this defense is going to eat, especially with the ball hawks that exist on the back end of that defense. Hey, this whole episode, I warned everybody it was going to be hot takey. It was going to be about a perfect season. It was going to be about what Ole Miss needed to do. And if the pieces were already there, the pieces are there. Ole Miss is going to be favored at kickoff likely in 11 of their 12 games. And the one they're not going to be favored in, they're going to be about a 5-point dog. It is not outside the realm of possibility that Ole Miss runs the table in doing that. It's also not outside the realm of possibility they go 9-3. But we'll deal with what we have to deal with. We'll see what happens. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 podcast. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen of the day, check out Spencer McLaughlin and the Locked On College Football podcast. He will get you hyped for an exciting season with in-depth discussion of the upcoming games and the ever-evolving landscape of college athletics. From conference realignment to the transfer portal to the NIL to the new college football playoffs, Spencer covers it all. You can find Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also yesterday, we did a mailbag from the insiders. The only way you can get a question on the show is by being an insider. And the way you become an insider is this way. Exciting news. You can now become a Locked On Ole Miss insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss. Our texting program sends you notifications on anything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. I'll even ask a question like, which running back is going to make you miss Quinshawn least? And you can have one-on-one interaction with me without dealing with those trolls. Also, you can enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so don't miss out. The link is in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube, we will send you to Locked On College Football, college sports today. Now, hotty toddy.